This project is an honest and in-depth perspective of and from former students at Milton Hershey School. We call ourselves Milts.
An organic, open discussion of life before, during, and after attending MHS.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Milt Talk Podcast, where we will be talking to former students, administrators, and teachers who all worked or went to Milton Hershey School over the years, and we are having conversations, not interviews, but conversations with them. And today we are lucky enough to have Mr. Jack Storm. Yeah, Mr. Storm! Man, Mr. Storm, it's fantastic to have you on. For those people out there who aren't familiar with you, can you tell them when you started at Milton Hershey School, the span, and under what
Sure. There? I started Milton Hershey in 1968.
Damn.
So where were you? Where were you guys in 1960? No, we won't get into it. So 1968 was my first year. I started as a social studies teacher. I replaced a legend at the school. His name, God, no, I blanked out on his name. But anyhow, I was there and I taught for about 6 years. And during that period of time, I was fortunate enough to pick up a degree in counseling and what have you. And I was a counselor then I tell people, for about an hour and a half. I was a counselor from about 74 to 76, right in that area. And 76, things were a little crazy at Milton Hershey School back in those days. That's when the biggest issue on campus was the guys wanted to protest their haircuts. We had a barber named Zuki, and he actually drove bus, but he was he also cut hair.
Nice.
So I'm sure that Jessica would appreciate that skill set. That's what he did. So anyhow, they got all upset about the hair and all this kind of stuff, and actually went out on the hillside one day and sat on the hillside and protested the haircuts and everything. And I'm thinking, like, other schools are protesting all kinds of major things in their lives, and we at Milton Hershey School, well, we got haircuts on our minds. So exactly. It was good stuff there. I then became assistant principal in 76. And did that until about 82, 83, and then was principal then for the next 21 years. I then actually retired, but I came back to the school and worked in human resources. It was interesting because I used to call it human remains when I worked there. And so I actually came back and helped them find teachers and house parents and things like that. Did that for another 5 years. So I ended up with a career span of 41 years at Milton Hershey School, and retired in 2009, and still serve with, Mike Weller and some of the folks on some of the committees that the school has, trying to find out some of the things they've done in the past and why they did them and everything like that. So that's pretty much it.
It's interesting.
You were a principal for what grades? For those that don't know, I know.
Oh, principal. All my career was at the high school.
Okay.
And, I was at the high school the entire time, and whether it was counseling assistant principal or principal and teacher, back at it was always grades 9 through 12.
Okay. Now, you said 9th through 12th. I remember the school used to have, and Mr. Whitman told us this, the school used to be just broken up into 2 different schools instead of 3. Were you around during that transition?
Yeah, well, there was, we were back, now that goes back just a little bit before me.
Before you.
Then they had and they still do. Now we have an intermediate division. You have your senior division, your intermediate, and then your elementary.
Right.
And of course, Don was principal at the elementary, and then he was assistant principal, first of all, at the middle school.
Right.
So, they were back in the days.
I mean, that's a long span, Mr. Storm. You've seen that school go, like you said, from protesting about haircuts to where they're at now. Even though you might not be actively involved, I'm sure you're, that list of people that you just mentioned, the Mike Wellers and yourself, and you guys. It's funny because there was a debate, online, and they were talking about the difference between homeboys and Milts, and somebody who's gone to the Milt since kindergarten, put in 12 or 13 years. You've been there for decades. So
Right.
you've seen everybody come and go.
Well, when I first started at the school, Jackie, when I first started, it was a white male orphanage
Right.
in '68. And then the minority students came in then. They had their first class. I remember some of those guys, Rick Davis, and they were a bunch of characters that were there at that time. And then, of course, then the girls came in. And the first graduating class of girls then was in '81. So it was, and there were only 13 of them at that time. And today, I think there's as many, if not more, girls than guys in the entire school.
Yeah.
What was the administrative like when you were accepting girls in? Were you guys prepared for how that would change things, or?
Okay, here I am teaching class. All right, so I'm teaching class, and the guys, it's all guys in front of me. They're saying, "Mr. Storm, we have a question." I said, "What's that?" They said, "Well, we're hearing stories about girls coming to Milton Hershey School," and I said, "Men, I got to tell you something. Women at Milton Hershey School." It's not the time or the place to have women there. And so we had the old Spartan magazine at the time, and they wrote an article about this. They put it in there, and they put this thing that I had made this comment about time and a place for everything in girls at Milton Hershey School. Well, there's a girl that graduated in 1985 by the name of Joanne Troist, and she came up to me one day, and she had this Spartan magazine. And there was a picture of me there, and it said about there's a time and a place for everything, and women at Milton Hershey School is neither. And so she said, "Do you say this?" And I said, "No, absolutely not." I mean,
Misquote if I ever seen one.
Yeah, quote. No, then I owned up to it and said, it was one of the best things that ever happened to the school is having the girls come in. When they came in there, because it was just good stuff. It was good for the guys, just from the standpoint of their deportment, how they looked and how they acted and everything like that. And then it was, of course, the girls had their pick of the litter because there were so many guys and so few girls. But no, that was they were some very interesting times there.
I know Jess was asking about it, but qualifications are probably a little bit different too. Like you were talking a lot about education, but I also heard you say something about house parents. And so qualifications to be a teacher at Milton Hershey School or a house parents must have changed over the years as well.
Well, they have and they haven't. One of the things, of course, for teaching is much easier at the school because the teacher's a teacher. Mm-hmm. And you just need good quality people. And we used to interview for that and interview in different groups. Interviewing at Milton Hershey School was always a tough situation. I'll give you a brief example. When I was coming to be a teacher at the school, I didn't know that much about it. I was a young kid right out of college, and somebody told me that there was an opening at Milton Hershey School. And I went to McDevitt in Harrisburg. Oh, nice. So all I knew is that we played Milton Hershey School in sports. And when we did, you felt sorry for them because you're dealing with a bunch of kids that didn't have both parents and that kind of stuff. And you felt sorry for them until they beat the snot out of us in the sport. And so it was kind of good from that standpoint. But hiring the teachers was always sort of a difficult situation because you're just looking for somebody special that had the empathy to deal with students, and just you had to be more than just a teacher. You had to have an interest in the young people. And my gosh, when I was applying for a position, I didn't know it at the time, I was applying and there were a total of 9 candidates for the position. Well, when I was applying, I went down and met Mr. Fisher. And Mr. Fisher was so impressive to me that I decided that that's where I wanted to work. And I didn't go out and do any more interviewing or anything like this. My mother used to get me up and she'd say, you got to go out and get a job and benefits and all this kind of stuff. And I'd say, okay, Mom. And I'd go out, but I'd go visit a buddy because I wanted to teach at Milton Hershey School. And I didn't realize, you talk about naive, I didn't realize that there were 8 other people in the running for this whole thing, because I just wanted to work at Milton Hershey School. And I thought, well, it'll come true. And lo and behold, it did. And then I found out later that there were other applicants. When I started interviewing as principal, I would get cut off the interviews at 150.
Wow.
Just to let you know that that's the expanse of, that's how many applicants I would get. And I'd say after that, look, I don't need any more. If I can't find any out of this group, I'll come back to you, human resources, and be able to find some at that point. Jeez. But the house parents are something different.
Right.
Because your house parents, back in the day, and I'll go back to the Elmer Norris days. If anybody remembers Mr. Norris at Woodside, he was a house parent there. And they were like 19 or 20 years old when they became house parents. Wow. And good people. In fact, Elmer stayed at the school and worked in the mechanical area, fixing small equipment and things like that for years. He was there before I got there and after I left. So he was really good people. But we're always looking for house parents. And today they're looking for house parents that you've got to be married, of course. Mm-hmm. You've got to be married for a minimum of 3 years. And so you've got, and you can't have more than 2 children because, you know, we want the emphasis at the school to be raising the kids at the school. We realize that if you're going to have a student home of your own, that you got to take care of them. So that's one of the things there. So yes, some things have changed there, but some of the tougher things are, is that people sometimes come to Milton Hershey School and they feel that they've been called to the school. They may feel it's a calling of God or anything like this. I used to tell some of them that, look, God has a sense of humor. And some of those students are named Jackie Stroman, you know what I mean? So it was a challenge for them to understand some of these things and to get what was really going on at the school. They didn't realize that part of the student's job was to get over on the adults. And so that was part of the thing there. But you had these unique individuals at the school who really were above and beyond that. And again, we had mentioned Bob Geyer before, and Ken Snyder, and some of the people that were really, really just stalwarts at the school for years and years. Duncan Kriebel and A.J. Jones, and they just come off my lips as I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot. So the reason we were talking about qualifications, and we were really looking forward to having you on, you know, I saw you in one of the chat rooms, and, you know, when we started this project, we wanted to talk to people about their experiences and all that. And I don't know if it was us being naive or just not understanding, but it seems like it's opened Pandora's box with people dealing with a lot of things. One of the subjects that came up the other day was bullying. And we were excited to have you on, just from being an educator and being involved with the school for so many years. Social media has changed the dynamic of that. And even before social media, people just dealt with a lot of stuff in Milton Hershey School. It wasn't all candy and cookies and everything. And so as somebody who was in administration, how did you deal with that back then? And what's your perspective on how the school's dealing with it?
Well, the bullying was actually ever present at the school, but it was in different degrees. Back when it was all guys at Milton Hershey School, not that the bullying didn't take place, but it was different because guys would handle the situation differently. For instance, if we had a fight that was two guys back then, it was wham bam, and they would end up eating lunch together. When girls got in, price of poker really changed because girls held grudges, and what were they fighting about? Boys.
Boys, right.
And so it was really kind of an interesting type thing, and the girls could really mix it up if they got into a fist fight or anything like that. We didn't have many, but the ones that we had were usually. But once we had girls, they were usually always girls, because the guys would take it and they'd go behind the bleachers or something like this, and they'd have it out one punch and boom, bam, and it was over. And the girls would hold grudges and hold grudges for a long time. Imagine that, Jess. So, that's the way
that's how it was. That's how it was for girls.
It really was.
Yeah.
You were more than just a principal, Mr. Storm. I mean, I feel like you would have to have an open dialogue with, at our time, home life. So,
absolutely.
Because it wasn't just school. That's what a lot of times when people hear Milton Hershey School, people just hear the word school. So
right.
Your reference point is going to school and coming home, in the public. Whereas with us, there's no separation of church and state. It was all
right
together.
And some of the fun things with that is that, somebody would come in and I'd get the word that they didn't have any homework or anything like this. And I said, well, really? Well, let's make a telephone call. Well, back in those days, everybody knew everybody. And today it's a little bit bigger. So they don't know each other. But I call a house parent and say, hey, so-and-so didn't have any homework last night. They're saying that they did all their homework in school and everything like that. And the house parent would say, yeah, that's what they told us. And I said, well, the teacher's right here. I said, well, come on in. And then we get them together, and it's kind of like, it would sort of blow the story of the student. And then once the student realized that the house parent and the teacher knew each other, and we used to try to get house parents to invite teachers out to the student home to have a meal and everything like this, and to get to know each other and to sit at each other with a basketball game or what have you, to see what was going on, so that they would find out, hey, here's what's taking place, and here's the story that we're getting, and oh no, that's not true. And so it really kind of, it really helped balance things out on an easier basis than it would be in a public school.
Yeah.
Question for you, Mr. Storm. So you said you had different positions at the school. Was there a favorite or a least favorite, or was there something about one of the positions?
Let's put it this way. When I was the assistant principal, that was my 5% club. 5% of the students were my real close friends because they got in trouble all the time. And so I'd come in and put a little show on, something like this, and scream and holler. And back in those days, we would give SWATs out. And I never gave a SWAT to somebody that didn't ask for it.
Right.
And the whole thing is, what are you asking for? You're going to lose, if you end up with vacation coming, and you would lose days of vacation if you had SWATs coming.
Right.
And then I'd introduce a little game that Bugs Bunny eats carrots. If you can say it after the first SWAT, before the second SWAT, I won't give you the second one. Retired undefeated with that story. So anyhow, that would be kind of things. But it was fun. It was good because that these guys would eventually get it. And some of them, I've been after retirement. For those that remember, Mr. Hopple, Bob Hopple, and I were over at the local watering hole in Hershey, and I stood there, and all of a sudden there's these two enormous students standing on either side of me, and they're looking down at me, and they're going like, do you know who that is? The other guy says, yeah, it's Storm. The other guy says, yeah. I said, somewhere, sometime, somehow, I'm going to see him. Well, I'm drinking a drink, and my drink's turning into a milkshake. And so they thought this was that kind of, and I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, they got a pretty good memory. And that's, the guy put his arm around me and said, look, we were talking about you the other day, and we realized how important the discipline factor, whether it was verbal, the physical, or whatever. I used to do exercises and that kind of stuff at times. To do that would grab their attention and say, hey, look, we don't want to do this. In fact, it's kind of interesting as they go out and raise their own families and this kind of stuff. I said, don't you dare swat them. But some of the other things are fair game. But it was good. Yeah, it was all, none of you guys ever got swats though.
No comment.
Yeah, no comment. Goey.
I'm telling you. Well, not for me. No, we actually stopped giving swats back in 1983.
No.
No, you're off on that one, my friend.
No.
Okay.
Later, much later than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we graduated in 90, and I think even then there was still SWATs going on.
Oh, really? There weren't supposed to be.
Yeah.
I think it stopped when we were in intermediate division, I believe.
Okay. Oh my gosh. How about that? Oh, that's when they were supposed to. We retired the paddles and all that kind of stuff. And
well, somebody didn't retire their paddle when I was in high school.
Not everybody. How about that? That's interesting.
Muted.
No.
So here's a question, Mr. Storm, and I didn't even think of this until now. See, even though you've been at the school for as long as you've been there, you were able to every day go home away from the school. Yes. And then you would go back to the school. So can you tell me how that dynamic is? Because us as students, we never saw that. The only time we got away from the school was on vacation or, on the weekends where we were going to, going home or something like that.
Sure.
So can you tell us how that dynamic is? Because
that
it's
dynamic,
not your normal school that you're going to.
Yeah, that wasn't really that difficult for me. I only lived 2 miles away from campus. In fact, I still live over near the Ronald McDonald House in Hershey.
Okay. I know what
and the fact of the matter is, during my entire time at the school, and I was entitled to live in a house, but I turned it down.
Okay.
I wanted to live in my own home and just be away from the school for a little bit each day. But there were so many evenings that I was on the phone, as my wife would attest to. Because you want to tie the loop with house parents or teachers, and sometimes with students, but usually with house parents and teachers, that would be a good time to get to talk to them and iron out some things that needed to be worked on. So it wasn't really that big of a thing. And then back in those days, we used to go to all the events that we used to take care of basketball and football and whatever have you. I was even strange. I'd go to a baseball game.
Right.
I don't know why, but anyhow, I always enjoyed Jody Schaefer and Cliff Ainsworth when they were coaching, and go over and probably watch them as much as I would the students. But no, there was a lot of good things that happened there because it wasn't a job. It was a way of life. It was actually dealing with this enormous family that you're constantly dealing with. So it wasn't anybody that looked at Milton Hershey School as how many hours you put in or anything like this. They didn't get it and they didn't last.
Right.
Because it just had to be it was a way of life. It really was. And that included when they'd go home. Vacation. It would include telephone calls that we'd have to make to the family members that say that, hey, so-and-so's, I don't know if this is a surprise to you, but we have a problem. Right. And I'd emphasize that we had a problem. And if we can't solve the problem may be coming back home.
Right.
So the support from the family was enormous. because the family 9 times out of 10 understood why the student was at Milton Hershey School in the first place. They weren't trying to get rid of them. They were trying to provide the best opportunity for them. So that was always some things, not in all cases, but in most cases.
Well, like Jack said, we do want to thank you for that, not keeping an eye on the clock, so to speak, or I'm off, so I can't address anything until I'm back at the school kind of thing. We do appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And we know, or at least I can speak for myself, and I'm pretty sure I can speak for the rest of the squad, is that we knew that once you were a part of the Milton Hershey School family, whether you went there as a student or you were a faculty, or even those that had close relatives go to the school, it was a big family. It was a more so, you know, what they say, the neighborhood raises the child, or, you know,
The village.
Village,
takes
brother,
a
not a
village.
neighborhood.
And that's exactly what it was at the mill. And we want to thank you for, as
Well,
students.
it's another interesting thing that has come out of this. It was probably 10, 12 years ago now. One of the students came over, and I mean, it's nothing in our realm, in our world, to have graduates come back and stay with us for a weekend, homecoming, whatever weekend it would be, and very common. And there was one young lady came back and stayed with us and said, "You're not on Facebook." And I said, "Nope. You need to be on Facebook." And I'm going like, "No, I don't." And they said, "Oh yeah, you need to be on Facebook." Well, she put me on Facebook, and it's amazing. The people that came out of the woodwork. I was class advisor back in 1972, and my class president was a guy named Stanishevsky. Nobody could find him. Well, here he saw me on Facebook, and we got in touch, and now he's back in the fold of the school. His name is no longer Stanishevsky, it's Stans. Stanishevsky was too long of a business name to work from, so he changed his name, and to protect the innocent, I told him. But he did a lot of things there. But it's amazing the amount of people that come on the Facebook type thing. Some of them at the beginning were saying, "Gee, I thought you were dead. Didn't know that you were still alive and around, Mr. Storm." And I'm going like, "Yeah, sorry to disappoint you. I'm still here." So but it's really interesting to get caught up with them. I've actually become very close friends with a number of people who I wasn't as close to in school as I was then afterwards, and as they became adults, and we could do the comparison of I would interject a little thing like, "Let me ask you something. Do you still have house shoes?" And they'd come back and they'd go, "Oh God, yes, I have to wear shoes. My wife doesn't understand why I want everybody to take their shoes off and put them in the foyer." Now, just little things like that we understand. And now I see that they're getting into things that probably because of the COVID experience here, they're talking about their favorite meals, their least favorite meals, and all that kind of stuff. It's hysterical because we all had those favorites and not so favorite meals, but it was a great memory. It's just something that, and I still do. I'm still highly involved in the school and activities and a couple committees.
Right.
So,
that's awesome.
Like many of the things, I feel like there's pros and cons. You know, things aren't usually black and white. For when we started this thing, like a lot of the like you were saying, the topics in the Facebook especially are fun and lighthearted, and it's gotten a little heavy sometimes. And, and I guess it's inevitable. And, you know, what we're trying to do is make it a safe place for people to have conversations and dialogue and talk about it and find old friends and all that stuff. So, you know, we're glad to see you're in there and, you know, talking amongst the kids.
Well, every now and then, Jackie, I have to get 2 of them aside. There may be 7 or 8 of them that are participating in a conversation, and you can see it's getting a little out of hand. So I'll write to the 2 of them and say, "Would you 2 report to the front office?" We need to discuss some things.
Put that right on the page. Put that right in the comment.
Just want to keep it in perspective, that's all.
Absolutely.
So it's good.
As a testament to what you just said, as far as it, and I'm just realizing this as well, like the bond that we have as students of the Milt, it seems as if the faculty and teachers may have a similar bond
Oh,
with other
incredible.
faculty and students, I mean, and teachers as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll go back and I'll just tip off some names that I've talked to this past week. Wally Conway.
Oh, Mr. Conway.
Yeah, Conway. I mean, he's as crazy as a loon, but he's
There's some
funny as
checks.
can be. And then Matt Hoover, to see how Hoover's doing. And then, of course, Weller. And as these people come up, now we're still in touch with Sharon Henry and John and Renee Forey. So there's the group, the adults at the school, and you can't just say teachers, because you have to say house parents and everybody too, because they get together. And yeah, it's a very close-knit society. Now I'll go to a football game before the game. Geyer has me come down, and I'll go. They have a place behind the bleachers where they Mark Rice and some of them make some hot dogs and stuff like this, and there'll be some new guys there. And it's funny, they'll say, oh yeah, I know your name, I've heard so many stories and all this kind of stuff, but so we're getting a chance to meet the next generation as well.
Right.
And so that's kind of neat. That's what it's really all about.
I got a quick one. So we're going to switch it up, Mr. Storm. It's a little different. Agoy, what's your Jack Storm memory?
All right, so I got so many, but my favorite one is I'm new on the Hill, and we had a certain time frame that we had to get from classes to our classroom,
Right.
And so I'm meandering the hallways. I'm a freshman, and he was in the hallways at all times.
Right.
So he hits me with, "You, who are you? What is your name? And why are you not in class?" So I say, "Sir, my name is Agoy Umbima, and I'm going to class now." And he said, "Don't you lie to me, son. What's your name?" And I said, "I'm Agoy Umbima, and I'm going to class." He said, "Okay. You want to stick with this? I'll get you in my office, and we'll get you to play the game, the Bugs Bunny game." And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. My name is Agoy Umbima." So we go into the office. He says, I got a smart guy here. He doesn't want to tell me his name. He says his name. "What'd you say your name was?" I said, "Agoy Umbima." And they said, "Well, Mr. Storm, that's his name." He looked over at me. He said, "You got about 10 seconds to get to class." I'm running the class because I didn't want to play that game.
No.
It was funny when he said that. I remember that game so well. He's like, "Oh, you want to play the Bugs Bunny game? I'll tell you about the Bugs Bunny game."
That's all. Jessica, what do you got?
Ooh, I probably what Agoy said, like he was always in the hallways. Like I do remember coming into senior hall and always seeing him. But I really probably only had one serious interaction with Mr. Storm. And that was, I was in a history class, and our history teacher was just being so rude to the kids, and I couldn't help myself. So I was calling him out on it, and I was like, "You need to knock it off." And he was like, "That's it, get to the principal's office." And I was like, "All right." So I walked down there, and I come in, and he's like, "What are you here for?" I was like, "Because I was sticking up for kids in the classroom." He was telling them that they didn't have any manners. Their mom didn't teach them any manners. Doesn't he know that half the people here don't have parents? And you were just like, "All right, just try to control your mouth in the classroom." See ya. I was like, "All right, sweet."
Porter, what you got?
Honestly, I've never played. This is the first I'm hearing of the Bugs Bunny game. I never knew about it, so that's a testament to me staying out of your office.
But wait a minute. But that is before you're after 1983.
Yes.
So I stopped in 83.
Oh, right.
That's
did not
when
stop.
when I became
He did not
principal,
stop.
then they changed that, and Ken Snyder was right after me, and then Hopple came in after that as the assistant principal. So they didn't. Now I'm not speaking for all the teachers, obviously, and house parents or whomever.
Right.
but we stopped the Bugs Bunny thing in '83.
Well, I think you
I'm
still
lucky,
did it
William.
in '84 because that's when I got to senior hall, '84.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, like I said, I never really was. I was a rule follower, so
Yeah.
I didn't see you much. But what I will say is,
Good
you were
job, buddy.
always present, and I thank you for that. Like, and you were always a friendly face and very approachable, which not everybody up at the in administration was.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I do thank you for that,
I
because I
agree.
know if I ever had anything to that I could come to you had I needed to. So I do thank you for that. You always were a friendly.
I agree, Mr. Storm. You had a way of being a comedic angle. You know, you kind of made it, even if it was a serious situation, you were always like very jovial and very happy, and like that's how I remember you. So first is both are my senior year. One, I remember it's getting close to graduation, and it's in the winter or the spring or something, and I had about 2 hairs on my chin at the time. I was always walking around doing all this stuff. And you looked at me and you giggled. You said, Stroman, one day you're going to hate having to shave every day. And you had 2 hairs. And I was like, no, I'm going to have the coolest goatee. Like, it let me go about my business. And then the other, and I don't, Jessica and Warner knows, or Goey might not even know this. I was a rule follower for the most part at Milton Hershey School, except for my senior year. I thought I was smarter than the system. I thought I had figured it out. And I was class vice president. And the last semester I had, for some reason, a stack of passes. And so I forget, was it Mr. Altman was his name?
Yeah, Altman.
And he did not like me, and I wasn't very fond of him, and I would write myself out of his class for the whole semester. And I would go, my dumb behind would go right downstairs. I'd be in Kriebel's class or Miss Baylor's class, and Altman said, okay, I got something for him. So at the end of the year, he failed me. I have never failed a class in my entire life. In my senior year, he failed me. And so that I had to, instead of graduating, I had to stay in Milton Hershey School after all those years and stay for summer school while everybody else graduated. And I remember I found out the news and I was trying to fix it and talk to everybody. And I said, Mr. Storm's my guy. He'll get me sorted out. I went down, I came down. I said, Mr. Storm, this isn't right. And I pled my case. There was no jokes or smiling on you that day. You said, Stroman, I don't know what to tell you. You dug this hole in yourself and you got to handle it like a man. And that's what I did. It sucked. I got to walk with my class, but I didn't get my my diploma.
Until, yeah.
And I stayed for the summer, and it was the most embarrassing thing I ever did in my life, but it taught me a life lesson. I still don't like Altman because I don't think he had to handle it that way. So he's still on my list. But I did understand, and I owned up to the fact that it was me who did that, not him. And so, I appreciated the way you handled it, and you didn't just jam it in my face or anything like that. You said, you got to man up and you got to take it. This is something you did. And I said, all right, Mr. Storm. And then I kind of left it alone after that.
There you go.
So, always
That's
lessons
great.
to be learned.
Yeah.
Great story. Great memories.
Always lessons to be learned.
I'm
Yeah,
telling you.
I want to say that was a big deal, though, to be able to realize that everybody wants to blame stuff on other people that they do.
Yep.
And sometimes you got to look at that person in the mirror. So I respect that.
Thank you, bro.
So we all talked about, our interaction with you. What would you say was one thing you learned from the students at Milton Hershey School? What was your takeaway?
Wow. One of the things that I always remember is that there was a student that came up to me and said, you do all these different things in the course of a day and a week and a month and a year. What's the most important thing you do? And I'm going like, that's a good question. I like that. And I thought for a minute and I thought, the most important thing I do is hire good people, hire good teachers. Because if you screw that up, you're walking around with a pooper scooper trying to fix things up in your own backyard. And so I always looked at that as the most important thing that I ever would do at the school, is to hire good people surrounding there. And we I always figured we had a pretty good staff. We didn't
Absolutely.
always hit 100%, but we were in the 90s,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we really
You
did
did.
well. So, I don't know.
I would agree with that. I'd
Yeah.
ask you, so you always had your favorite teachers, as kids we did, like I said, Mr. Kriebel, Miss Baylor, that, everybody had their favorite teachers that were popular, had a certain
Mr. Webster.
Oh, yeah.
personality. Who would you say is an unsung hero? Maybe because of their personality wasn't as bright, but they made as much of an impact as any other teacher. Would you give me a couple names that you think?
Well, there were so many good teachers. Today's current teacher, like a Sharon Henry, she's very, very good. She's opinionated, but she, at the same time as that, back in the day, I would say Matt Hoover had an awful lot to do with students. Matt Hoover turned out more outstanding female math students than anybody, because his first day of class, you could picture.
I know what
I'd
you're
like
going
to
to say.
get
I
down
already
there.
know what you're going to say.
His first day of class, he'd come in, he'd say, okay, everybody line up against the wall. And he said, guys, come down here. I want you comfortable. Can you see? Are you all right? You sit there and you sit there. Oh, girls, just fill in the back, because there's just have a seat, because you're missing a chromosome and you can't do math. And he would start out from the day one about girls not being able to do math. And he turned out some phenomenal math teachers. And then he would also work with student teachers and that type of stuff. He and Conway actually worked together and Wally had a slower group of math, and Hoover had the higher math, and they would put these student teachers together. It was hysterical to see these adults work with these kids, whether they be the high school students or the college students, and trying to get them. And it was, they were all, but they loved what they did. The kids and the poetry and everything like this, and reciting the poems out in the hallway and all that kind of stuff. It was kind of a rite of passage for all these people. Right. So yeah, we had some good, even Crazy K-Spear. I mean, roll the balls out K-Spear. He was a character. Just talked to him last night down in Florida, and what a character he was. And then I don't know if some of the crazy ones were there when you guys were around. Balisic.
EIGHTEENTH.
I spit all over my screen when I did that too.
Hey boy, tell him. Balisic. His name's Balisic. So
is he still?
He would be there, and I mean, names like Tellett, John Tellett. He was a driver ed teacher, and we had a guy, Bainey Boozer. He was just a little wee bitty guy. He still holds the record for the longest punt in Cornell Stadium. And as he said, it was down at the University of Pennsylvania field down there, and they don't even play ball there anymore, I don't think. But he used to tell everybody, we'd get him wound up and tell the story, and he'd say, there was a hell of a wind blowing that day. And so I think his kick went for 96 yards.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was, but it was that myriad of people that collectively put together and made a lot of fun out of the whole things. And then, of course, Mr. Fisher was such a mentor to myself and to so many people there. He was a great person.
Yeah,
great person. So
he really was.
Yeah.
Got anything? There's so much to talk about with you.
I know. It's funny you brought up the Mr. Hoover thing, because I had him for math.
Oh, you did.
I
don't let the door.
Yeah. He used to piss me off something awful. I used to get so mad because he'd be like, don't worry, you don't need to learn the math. Your place is pregnant, barefoot, and in the kitchen. And I was like, what?
Oh, yeah.
I was like, he has lost his mind.
Yeah.
Like
And he'd laugh. Then he'd laugh
Yeah,
at everybody and sit at his desk and just laugh at him. And he kind of waved like, go and
the
get
girls
out of here.
just, you sit in the back. Don't worry about it. Just sit in the
And
back.
he finally put that thing up on the back of his room is don't let the door and then dot, just to figure that out. But yeah, he was really good.
But it did. I mean, I was just like, I'm going to show him that I could do math.
Exactly.
I really couldn't, though. I was horrible at math. It was not good.
Exactly what he did. And these guys are something. So
Well, I do have one more question before we do.
Sure.
Mr. Storm. Now, you said that it was Mr. Fisher that made you want to go and work at the mill.
that's correct.
Was there a moment when you got to the mill where you said, you know what, I do belong here. This is my place. This is my calling, so to speak. Was there, or was it just the...
Well, okay. And this almost comes with a funny story because it was my first year there and I was a teacher and I would go up and I was in W200 and I come out into the hallway and the kids would walk by and everything like this. And of course, back in those days, they're all guys, and they all wore Weinberg shoes.
Yeah.
Weinbergs.
Weinbergs. And everybody had a Weinberg shoe. Well, at that time, when I first started to teach, I lived with my parents in Harrisburg. And so at the end of the day, I'd get in my car and I'd drive home. Well, this is like the first week that I was there. And so I'm driving home and there's this guy out there hitchhiking. And it was a Milt. It was a kid from the school. So I stopped, pulled over, and I said, where are you going? He said, to Harrisburg. I said, fine, get in. So I gave him a ride up to Harrisburg. Imagine this going on today. So I gave him a ride up to Harrisburg and left him off at, he wanted to go to a train station or something like bus station at that time. And he wanted to go there. And so I left him off and I said, we have a good day. And he said, thank you. And all this, didn't never said anything. About 3 days later, I'm in the hallway and this kid comes walking by. And he's going like, you're the guy that gave me a ride. I said, yeah. He said, well, why did you give me a ride? I said, because you wanted to go to Harrisburg. Pardon me. And then I said, look, you wanted to go to Harrisburg? I was going to Harrisburg. Gave you a ride. He said, I was running away from school. I said, well, there must be something that you didn't like. And I said, now there must be something that you do like because you're back. To this day, we are very close friends.
That's awesome.
He was an auto mechanic student. And it was at that time that I knew that I had landed someplace where I really felt comfortable with. There was no question about that. And it was good. And it was my first year, somebody told me, don't smile. If you're going to be a teacher, don't smile the first week or so that you're in school. So I'm trying to be very stoic and everything like this. And this one guy came in the class. It was the first day of school. And he came in and he came there and he said, hello. And I said, excuse me. I said, where are you going? He said, well, he's going to go back and sit down. And I said, oh, no, we're at Milton Hershey School and we have our own barbers and you need a haircut. And the kid says, but I said, the one thing I don't want to do is get in an argument with you. My first day of teaching and first day of school here. And he said, but I said, no, if you'll just go back and have, well, this one guy in the back of the room, who's very good friends till this day, is laughing like crazy. And I'm going like, young man, what seems to be so funny there like that? And he says, oh, nothing. He said, nothing. He said, just here. I said, sir, I said, would you mind going up and getting your hair cut now? And he said, can I take care of it now? And I said, yeah, that's the idea. Take care of it right now. He pulled his wig off. He was wearing a wig and he had little strands of hair I don't know what was wrong with him. And he had little strands of hair sticking out. And I'm going like, oh my God. And I mean, the guys are howling. They're just, and I'm just kind of standing there. And I thought, well, I guess this is funny. So I just started, because our laughing. I said, put your rug back on, sit down. I said, we've got it made. So that was, it's those kind of things and those kind of stories that just live in infamy for me that just really made my life at the school what it was. And
we thank you for being such a big part of our lives at the school as well.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure.
Any particular stories with you, but I do remember your face being, you're always present and you always had a very welcoming demeanor. So I thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's
Thank
great.
you so much for joining us, Mr. Storm. You know, it's a pleasure to get some of these stories that some people may know and may not know. You know, it sounds like you still keep in contact with a lot of Milts, but it spans many generations.
Yeah.
Younger people don't know some of these stories, and that's what we're trying to capture with this. Is there anything you want to tell the people or say in closing before we leave?
No, it's just that, again, Milton Hershey School was just, it was wonderful for me. People said, you wouldn't have made it in the real world. It's good you were at Milton Hershey School. And I'm going like, you're probably right. Because it wasn't a confined. It was just a way of living there, and it really meant a lot to me. And the interesting thing is, if I don't know, are you going to show this to people, or are people going to see this?
Eventually, after we edit this, Mr. Storm, the people will see this. We started off just doing a regular podcast where it's audio.
That's good. Okay. So I should save my Pete Gert stories for people because he was a student. And gee, I don't want. I shouldn't do.
Oh no, feel free. We have the time. We have the time.
That
So
could be a
that's
whole
good.
another episode.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's a whole new tape right there. But we did have a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're hoping to have Pete on down the road, and you know, I think we're all excited and proud that the school got it right by bringing back we think it's important to have a Milt, you know, running the school. They understand it a little bit better, and we're proud that Pete's in there. And
Well, he does a magnificent job.
yeah,
And,
I think he gets it. And you know, we're looking forward to having him on down the road. And if you don't get into the Pete story this time, we would love to have you back to.
Oh, maybe you'll just have to ask him.
Oh, yeah, well, we'll see.
Yeah, are there any stories that involve Jack Storm that you'd like to? He'll keep quiet for a while then.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, real pleasure. I'm glad you guys are working on this project. It sounds like it's something that's going to be very valuable for the school.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Storm, we
Okay.
love you.
From you, that's
Right.
big praise. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, we'll talk. Mr. Storm, one thing before you go, will you do us a favor and just look into the camera and say, this is Jack Storm, and I'm here on Milt Talk Podcast, on the Milt Talk Podcast.
Okay. This is Jack Storm, and I'm here on Milt Podcast.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Or,
All right, Mr.
There you go, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
All right.